3 years ago, I was visiting a colleague in Stuttgart, Germany. He was a senior engineer at a company you'd recognize. He'd worked there for 14 years. He lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. He drove a 9-year-old Volkswagen Golf. He brought his lunch to the office in a metal container every single day. I asked him, not rudely, just genuinely curious, didn't he ever want to upgrade? New car, nicer apartment, eat out more? He looked at me like I'd asked something bizarre. And then he said something I've been thinking about ever since. He said, "Why would I spend money I've already decided not to spend?" I didn't understand what that meant at first. But then he explained. In his family, and in most families where he grew up, the decision about what to spend wasn't made at the store or the restaurant or the dealership. It was made once, at home, at the beginning of each year. And once made, it was finished. There was nothing to decide in the moment, because the decision had already been made. I thought about my own life back home. I was making decent money, probably similar to him, but I was making spending decisions dozens of times a day. At the coffee shop, on Amazon at midnight, at the grocery store when something caught my eye. Every one of those decisions was an opportunity to leak money. And I was leaking constantly. He wasn't. That conversation sent me down a rabbit hole that took months. I started researching the region he was from, Swabia, Baden-Württemberg in the southwest of Germany. And what I found completely changed how I thought about money.
Here's what most people don't know about Swabia. Baden-Württemberg is home to Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, Bosch, SAP, and over 300 mid-sized companies that are world leaders in their industries. The region has the lowest unemployment rate in Germany, consistently. The per capita GDP is among the highest in all of Europe. But walk through a Swabian town and you will not see the wealth. No flashy cars and driveways, even when the person driving a 12-year-old Ford has a 7-figure net worth. No renovated kitchens just because the old one looks dated. No designer clothes at the Saturday market. There's a saying that captures the entire Swabian financial philosophy in 8 words. Schaffe, spare, Häusle, baue. Work, save, build a house. Rating system. But underneath those 8 words is a financial culture that runs hundreds of years deep. A set of habits so embedded in daily life that most Swabians don't even think of them as habits. They just think of them as common sense. The problem is, this common sense never made it to America.
We didn't get the Swabian chapter. We got the version of wealth that involves showing up, spending up, and hoping the income keeps pace. This video is about the other version. 10 Swabian money habits that built one of the wealthiest regions in the world. Habits that are almost never discussed outside of Germany, and that you can begin applying to your own financial life today, regardless of what you earn. Some of these will feel immediately practical. Others will challenge something much deeper than your budget. Let's get into it. The first habit doesn't have a clean English translation, and that's intentional. Sparsamkeit, pronounced Sparsamkeit, roughly means thriftiness or frugality. But those English words carry a negative charge. Frugal sounds like you can't afford things. Thrifty sounds like you're pinching pennies out of desperation. Sparsamkeit carries no such shame. In Swabian culture, being sparsam is a compliment. It means you're someone who manages resources with intelligence and respect. It means you understand the value of what you have. A Swabian grandmother doesn't tell her grandchildren to be cheap. She tells them to be sparsam, and the entire room nods with approval. The distinction matters enormously because behavior follows identity. If you believe that spending less is embarrassing, you will unconsciously resist it. You'll justify purchases to preserve your self-image. You'll spend, not because you want the thing, but because not spending makes you feel poor. This is the trap most Americans fall into. A 2024 survey by Bankrate found that 35% of Americans admitted to spending money on things they didn't need or want specifically because they didn't want to look like they couldn't afford it. Not because they wanted the thing, because they feared the perception. Sparsamkeit eliminates that trap entirely by reframing what frugality means. When your culture treats restraint as intelligent rather than inferior, you stop performing consumption. You stop buying to signal status and start saving to build it. How to apply it? The next time you decide not to buy something, notice what story you tell yourself. Do you feel deprived, restricted, like you can't afford it? Or do you feel like someone who just made a smart decision? The Swabian shift is this. Begin telling yourself the second story. Not, I can't afford this, but I've decided this isn't worth my money. Those two sentences feel completely different. One is a limitation. The other is a choice. And choices made with confidence stick. Limitations resisted eventually collapse. Habit 2. Kehrwoche. This one sounds almost too mundane to be about money. But stay with me, because it's about something that costs Americans billions of dollars every year. Kehrwoche, literally sweeping week, is a centuries-old Swabian tradition. In apartment buildings and shared housing, residents rotate responsibility for cleaning communal areas, stairwells, entryways, sidewalks outside. There's a schedule. Everyone knows when it's their turn. Nobody hires it out. Nobody skips it. Kehrwoche isn't just about cleanliness. It's about a principle that runs through all of Swabian life. You handle your own responsibilities. You don't pay someone else to do what you are capable of doing yourself. Now, before you write this off, this isn't about being too cheap to hire help. It's about the habit of asking the question before automatically outsourcing. American consumer culture has almost completely eliminated that question. We outsource laundry, meal prep, grocery shopping, basic home repairs, lawn care, financial planning, tax filing, often for tasks we are entirely capable of doing ourselves, not because we don't have time, but because we've stopped expecting ourselves to do them. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimated that American households spent an average of $14,800 per year in 2023 on services that in previous generations would have been handled personally. That's not all outsourcing. Some of it is genuinely worth it. But a significant portion is outsourcing driven by habit and convenience rather than genuine necessity. The Kehrwoche principle isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about consciously deciding which things are worth paying for and refusing to pay for the ones that aren't. How to apply it? Make a list of everything you pay someone else to do in a typical month. Subscriptions, services, convenience fees. Next to each one, write, could I do this? Would I? Not should, would. Be honest. The ones you could and would do yourself, cancel them. Redirect that money to savings or investments. A friend of mine did this exercise and freed up $340 a month she hadn't noticed was leaving. Not from sacrifice, from attention. Habit 3. Kaufe einmal, Kaufe gut. There's a Swabian phrase that translates roughly as, buy once, buy well. The idea is simple. Swabians don't buy cheap things that break and need replacing. They save longer, spend more once, and then use the thing for decades. My colleague's Volkswagen Golf, 9 years old. He could afford a new car. He chose not to buy one because the old one worked. When I asked him when he'd replace it, he said, when it stops working. That answer alone represents a different relationship with possessions than most Americans have. The American consumer economy is built on a different premise. Planned obsolescence. Products designed to become outdated or break down within a predictable cycle. Fashion cycles that make last season's clothes feel embarrassing. Technology refreshes that make 3-year-old phones feel ancient. The result? Americans replace smartphones every 2.5 years on average, according to CIRP research. The average American owns 7.5 pairs of jeans,
but regularly wears only 4 of them. Furniture gets replaced, not because it's broken, but because it no longer matches a new aesthetic.
Every one of those replacements is a wealth transfer, from your savings account to a corporation. The Swabian approach cuts this cycle entirely. When you buy something once and buy it well, you exit the replacement cycle. The expensive leather boots that cost $300 and last 15 years cost $20 a year. The $60 boots that fall apart in 18 months cost $40 a year and generate twice the waste. This is not radical. It's arithmetic. How to apply it? Before any significant purchase, ask, what is the cost per year if I keep this for 10 years? That reframe, from sticker price to annualized cost, changes almost every purchasing decision. A $2,000 couch kept for 15 years costs $133 a year. A $600 couch replaced every 4 years costs $150 a year. And you've gone through the stress of shopping and moving furniture 4 times. Buy once, buy well, use it until it stops working.
Häusle, baue. Remember the Swabian motto: Schaffe, spare, Häusle baue. Work, save, build a house. The build a house part is key. Not because every Swabian literally builds a house, but because the mentality of saving towards something concrete and large over a long time horizon is embedded in the culture from childhood. Swabians are famous for saving money for years, sometimes decades, before making a major purchase. Traditionally, buying a home meant having a substantial down payment, sometimes 30–40% saved in cash. No rushing, no stretching, no we'll figure out the payments. This is the opposite of American financial culture's relationship with major purchases. The average American down payment on a home in 2024 was 8%, according to NAR data. The average car purchase involves a 72-month loan with $750 plus monthly payments. We buy big first and pay later, often paying 20–30% more in interest for the privilege. Häusle baue mentality reverses the sequence. You earn the purchase before you make it. The thing you want becomes the reason to save, not the reason to borrow. There's a psychological dimension here too. The anticipation of saving toward a goal produces genuine satisfaction. Multiple behavioral economics studies, including work by Dr. Emily Häusle at Carnegie Mellon, have shown that delayed gratification becomes less difficult when the goal is specific and visible. People who know exactly what they're saving for and can track progress experience far less deprivation than people saving into an abstract. How to apply it? Name your savings target. Not emergency fund, not savings. Give it a real name. The house down payment. The car I'll buy in cash in 3 years. Financial independence at 52. When your savings has a face, every deposit feels like progress rather than sacrifice. Habit 5. Mittelstand-Denken. This habit is about time horizon, and it might be the most difficult one for Americans to adopt, not because it's complicated, but because it runs directly against how we're trained to think. Mittelstand refers to Germany's famous mid-sized family businesses, companies with 50 to 500 employees, often family-owned for 2, 3, sometimes 5 generations. Germany has over 3.5 million Mittelstand companies. They generate 35% of Germany's GDP and employ nearly 60% of its workforce. What makes the Mittelstand remarkable isn't their size, it's their time horizon. These companies are not managed for quarterly earnings reports. They're managed for the next generation. Decisions about investment, hiring, expansion, and pricing are filtered through a single question. Will this still be good for the company in 20 years? Swabians apply this same generational thinking to personal finance. Money decisions are not made in the context of this month or this year. They're made in the context of what you are building, slowly, deliberately, for your future self and, if relevant, the people after you. Americans, by contrast, are conditioned to think in very short cycles.
The Federal Reserve's own research shows that 37% of Americans would struggle to cover a $400 emergency expense.
Not because they don't earn enough, but because almost nothing in American financial culture encourages planning beyond the immediate. Short-term thinking is expensive. Payday loans exist because people can't wait 2 weeks. Credit card debt accumulates because gratification can't be delayed. Retirement is underfunded because "I'll deal with that later" is the default mode. The Mittelstand mentality asks you to extend your planning horizon dramatically. Not by months, by decades. How to apply it. Once a year, write a letter to yourself 10 years into the future. Describe the financial life you want that person to be living, the assets they hold, the debt they don't carry, the options they have. Then, work backward from that letter to the decisions you need to make this year. This is not a motivational exercise. It's a planning tool. The gap between where your future self will be and where you want them to be is exactly the gap your current decisions need to close.
Nichts verschwendet. Nothing is wasted. This is Swabia's version of the Japanese concept of motanai. But where motanai is primarily about regret over waste, the Swabian version is more functional, almost engineering-minded. Waste is inefficiency. Inefficiency is unacceptable. Swabians famously use everything completely before replacing it. The bar of soap is used until it's a sliver. The loaf of bread gets turned into breadcrumbs or bread pudding before anything goes in the trash. Clothes are repaired, altered, repurposed. Cars are maintained meticulously so they run longer, not replaced when they're unfashionable. There's a story, probably apocryphal but widely repeated, about a Swabian farmer who drove the same tractor for 40 years. Not because he couldn't afford a new one, because the old one worked, and replacing something that works is a failure of logic. The financial math here is staggering. The USDA estimates that American households waste approximately 30% of the food they purchase. On average grocery spending of $5,700 per year, that's $1,710 in the trash. Americans discard approximately 82 pounds of clothing per person per year, much of it barely worn. The Swabian approach to waste is to treat every dollar spent as a resource to be fully consumed. You don't buy it unless you'll use all of it. You don't discard it until it's genuinely exhausted. You find the second yeast before reaching for the replacement. How to apply it. For 1 week, track everything you throw away. Food, products, packaging, subscriptions you don't use. Photograph it if that helps make it concrete. At the end of the week, calculate what that waste cost you. Most people are shocked by the number. The awareness alone, without any forced discipline, tends to cut waste by 20 to 30%. Habit 7. Rücklage. Every Swabian household keeps a Rücklage, a reserve. Not an investment, not accessible spending money. A reserve. Untouched, waiting. The cultural expectation in Swabia is that a household should have enough saved to cover 6 to 12 months of living expenses in liquid cash.
Not because disaster is inevitable, but because knowing the reserve exists changes everything about how you operate. When you have no reserve, every unexpected expense is a crisis. The car repair that forces a credit card balance, the medical bill that derails the month's budget, the job loss that becomes existential within weeks. Without a reserve, you are always one problem away from a financial emergency. And financial emergencies are expensive. Emergency borrowing costs more. Panic decisions cost more. Distress selling costs more. With a reserve, the same events become inconveniences rather than catastrophes. The car repair is handled. The medical bill is paid. Even a job loss buys you time to find the right next step rather than accepting the first desperate option. The psychological effect is equally profound. Research from the Financial Health Network found that people with even $500 in emergency savings reported significantly lower financial anxiety and made measurably better long-term financial decisions than those with no reserve, regardless of income level. The Rücklage isn't about the money sitting there earning nothing. It's about what that money does to your nervous system.
It changes how you negotiate at work because you're not desperate. It changes how you invest because you're not reactive. It changes how you spend because you're not operating from scarcity. The reserve is the foundation. Every other Swabian habit is built on top. How to apply it? If you have no emergency fund, your only financial priority is building one. Before investing, before paying extra on debt, before anything else. Start with $1,000, then $3,000, then 3 months of expenses, then 6. The exact amount matters less than the act of starting. Open a separate account. Name it Rücklage. Transfer something today. Habit 8.
Handwork means craftsmanship or trade skill. Swabia has one of the highest concentrations of skilled tradespeople in Germany. Engineers, mechanics, carpenters, craftspeople who understand how things are built and maintained. This isn't coincidental. Swabian culture deeply respects practical knowledge. Understanding how your car engine works, knowing how to do basic plumbing, being able to look at a financial statement and understand what it says. However, the financial implication is direct. People who understand how things work, mechanically, financially, legally, get ripped off less, make better decisions, and waste less money on problems they could have prevented. The average American spends over $500 a year on car repairs that a basic understanding of maintenance could have prevented. Financial illiteracy costs the average American household $1,200 a year in avoidable fees, penalties, and poor product choices, according to the National Financial Educators Council. People who understand how investments work don't pay 1.5% management fees on funds that underperform the index. Handwork applied to personal finance means developing genuine competency in the basics. Not becoming an accountant, not studying for a CFA, but really understanding how compound interest works, how a mortgage amortizes, how inflation erodes purchasing power, what an expense ratio actually costs you over 30 years. My colleague in Stuttgart managed his own investment accounts, not because he was a finance person, he was an engineer, but he had taken the time to understand the basics. He knew what he owned and why. He paid no advisor fees. Over a 20-year period, that knowledge alone was worth tens of thousands of dollars. How to apply it? Identify the one area of personal finance you least understand. Invest 30 minutes a week for 90 days in learning that one thing. Compound interest, tax-advantaged accounts, index funds, estate planning. Pick one. Go deep on it. Knowledge, once built, compounds the same way money does.
Habit 9. Bescheidenheit. Bescheidenheit means modesty or humility. And in Swabia, it extends to how you display, or more precisely, refuse to display, wealth. The wealthiest families in Swabian towns are often unidentifiable. They drive ordinary cars, wear ordinary clothes, eat at the same restaurants as everyone else. Not because they can't afford to do otherwise, because conspicuous consumption is considered embarrassing. There's a Swabian joke. The Mercedes owners live in Stuttgart. The Mercedes builders live in Swabia. The engineers and skilled workers who make the cars, many of them quite wealthy, drive something sensible. Compare this to American wealth signaling. The Luxury Institute found that 38% of luxury goods purchases in the US are made by people who cannot financially sustain that spending, bought specifically to project a wealth they don't have. Social media has turned wealth display into a competitive sport, and the financial cost of playing that sport, maintaining the appearance, is devastating. When you free yourself from the obligation to perform wealth, something remarkable happens.
the money you were spending on performance becomes available for building. The energy you were spending on maintaining an image becomes available for actually living. Serious. Bescheidenheit isn't humiliation. It's the recognition that the wealthiest people in the room are often the least visible ones. And that the most dangerous competitor in the room might be the person in the unremarkable car who's been quietly building for 30 years while everyone else was performing.
How to apply it? For 1 month, track every purchase made for appearance rather than function. The upgrade chosen for status. The brand paid for its logo. The venue chosen to be seen at. Calculate the total. Then ask, what is this buying me that actually matters? Most of the time, the honest answer is nothing that matters.
Beständigkeit is the one that makes all the others work. Beständigkeit means steadiness, consistency, reliability. In Swabia, this is the character trait most respected in financial matters. Not the person who made a spectacular investment. Not the entrepreneur who built a company and sold it. The most admired financial figure in Swabian culture is the person who, for 40 years, earned steadily, saved steadily, spent within their means steadily, and arrived at retirement with everything provided for. No drama, no crisis, no dependency. That's not exciting. American culture finds it almost boring. We celebrate the home run, the viral startup, the lucky crypto trade. We don't make documentaries about the Swabian engineer who maxed out his pension for 30 years and retired at 63 with complete financial security. But that engineer is far wealthier than almost everyone else in the story, and far more common. Compound interest is not a complicated idea, but its effects are counterintuitive in a specific way. The emphasis? The difference between being consistent and being almost consistent is enormous. Someone who invests $500 per month for 30 years at 8% average returns accumulates approximately $745,000. Someone who does the same but skips 2 years during a downturn accumulates approximately $570,000. The 2-year pause cost $175,000. Not from the pause itself, but from the compounding that didn't happen during it. Beständigkeit is the commitment to never pausing. Not when the market drops. Not when the habit feels boring. Not when something shiny appears. You made the decision. The decision is made. There's nothing to decide. That's what my colleague meant. Why would I spend money I've already decided not to spend? The decision was made at the system level. The system runs.
He doesn't have to decide anything at all. I want to leave you with something my colleague said near the end of our conversation that week in Stuttgart. I asked him if he ever felt like he was missing out. All the things he could buy and didn't, the upgrades he could make and hadn't. He thought about it for a moment and then said, the people I know who spend the most on life don't seem to be enjoying it more than me. They seem to be working harder to afford what they've already bought. That sentence has stayed with me. The Swabian model of wealth is not about deprivation. It's not about being the most frugal person in the room or winning some kind of austere competition. It's about building a life where money is not a source of anxiety, and then living that life quietly, without fanfare, for as long as possible. The 10 habits in this video aren't radical. Sparsamkeit, Kehrwoche, buying once and buying well, saving towards specific goals, thinking in generations, wasting nothing, keeping a reserve, building real knowledge, living without performance, staying consistent. None of these require a special income. They require a decision about what wealth actually is. In Swabia, the answer has been the same for hundreds of years. Wealth is security. Wealth is freedom. Wealth is having more than you need without anyone knowing it.
The wealthiest person in a Swabian town isn't the one with the biggest house.
It's the one who never has to worry about money, and who built that reality one steady, unspectacular, completely boring decision at a time. That's available to you. It's been available all along. It just wasn't in the chapter they gave us.